Well, how about that? Finally got it working. All right. So, better late than never, huh? Sorry for the extensive delay, folks. Do I have a 5x5? Can everybody hear me? Wow, what an ordeal. All right. So there were a whole bunch of people waiting, and I think they probably gave up after an hour and a half of messing with OBS and YouTube. And it turns out it was a glitch in the live stream broadcast that I set up. For some reason, it wasn't accepting that, and twice I tried to go live, and it let me go live with something completely different that nobody knew about. So. Anyway, this is working, and if you want to share the link around so people know that it's happening, that would be cool. And so I thought I would just start with a video that I posted on my channel a few days ago. This is an older video that many of you have already seen and probably already seen on my channel, but a lot of people haven't, and it's just kind of a good opener to just prime the pump for what we're going to talk about today. And if you haven't seen it, you'll enjoy it. But it gives some people a chance to roll in and let me know how the audio is on the video. So it's on max here. Let me just see so we don't blow.
Guys, yesterday I put up a video about what looks like a massive ancient tree.
How's the video?
And evidence of branches and leaves laying next to a huge stump. In fact, one of the leaves measured taller than the Empire State Building. I want to take you to the location now, and here we go. And the area that we are looking at is north central Madagascar, right in this area here. There are more than one example of what look like to me ancient tree stumps with quite possibly large branches and large leaves in some cases, laying next to some of these very huge structures. This is one that I showed you guys yesterday. Measure this thing and you can look at the side view even on Google Earth here. We'll go side to side. There's the stump. 4,000 foot on this side over here. Go across. A little taller on this side, about 4,150 feet. It's over 8 miles wide. Look at the miles. 8.45 miles. We could set the entire city of Nashville and all of its suburbs right there quite comfortably. If you go to the left, which would be about the 10, 11 o'clock position, all over in this area, you'll find what look like leaves and branches all over the ground. Here's an example of one here. There's many, many, many examples. This one here we're going to measure real quick. And I'll show you just to kind of put things in perspective how long that thing is compared to something that's very tall. So we'll measure from top to bottom. And we'll go in feet, 1,596 feet. That one branch is taller than the Empire State Building we showed in a video earlier, right there. I think it's the same exact branch that's on the ground, taller than the Empire State Building. And there's others. There's many others. So if you look around, you'll also find many more examples of these leaves, like right here, big, huge branches. To me, they look like something in the cedar family. Obviously, this is in a league all of its own. Nothing like what we know today. I mean, we think 200 feet's tall. Can you imagine? If this thing's got, which it does, it looks like it's got this is a pretty good example here, and that's a cedar. 8 mile wide base. Look there. Good example. And that looks like, to me, a cedar. But the base of that one that I showed you is 8 miles wide. It's near a river. It would have taken a lot of water to supply a living organism that big with an 8 mile wide base. And again, the height, I couldn't even begin to speculate. It's hard to wrap your mind around something that could be that tall. And you know it had to be many miles tall. There's another example up here. Looks like yet another ancient tree stump. Got a river here. You got what looked like little arteries running through it. I'm sure at one time those supplied water to a very tall structure, which is right here in north central Madagascar. If you go over here to the west coast of Madagascar, you'll find yet another, what looks like to me, a very good example of a tree, or what used to be an old tree. This is the stump. You've got the primaries, which are the rivers. That's its primary source of water, probably right next to the roots, and the root systems go probably many miles deep. We'll measure this one for perspective purposes, just from edge to edge. 8.5 miles long. It's about the same size as the one next door. Let's measure its side height. Go from here to here. There you go. And there's your structure. It goes up about 1,175 feet. And it's 8.5 miles across. It's got 2 rivers and a lot of secondaries that fed it water at one time. You'll also find in this area, if you look close, they're a little harder to see. There's other examples over here, what to me looks like once was an old tree, old tree, old tree. I just showed you one over on the left. If you look closely in this area here to the left of this big structure, you'll find what look like occasionally some sort of a large seed that is laying next to a branch or a leaf, like in this case here. There are examples if you look closely, and those things are like 27 feet wide in some examples. Here's another picture of the landscape that you'll find next to that stump that I shared with you guys yesterday, and to me that's undeniable. Those are some sort of leaves from a big tree from long, long ago. And you know, Earth is a fascinating place, and this is just one of the many fascinating aspects of our planet. So enjoy, guys. That's on Google Earth, once again, in central Madagascar. There are more than one example in this area. Have fun looking around. Thanks for watching. Have a super day. Be safe out there.
Pretty cool video.
Guys, yesterday
Oops. Start that one up again. Yeah, so I came across that video, I don't know, it's been a few years at least, and that came after this video made the rounds, No Forests on Flat Earth. Maybe a lot of you have seen this as well. And this one was the first that I saw that introduced the idea of, hold on, just adjusting the microphone here. A little closer, someone said it wasn't so loud. How's the audio now? Yeah, so this video was pretty remarkable because it was the first time that I had seen all of these different examples of how tree stumps match a lot of these plateaus around the world. And there's a lot of different opinions about these, and we're going to talk about a bunch of them today, about whether or not they're tree stumps. Some think they're tendons, others think that they're mushrooms, some think that they're the remains of large-scale mining waste, and we're going to talk about all of that today. But this is definitely a video to take a look at, No Forests on Flat Earth, and really kind of sparked the whole idea. And then after seeing this and a video by Jade Dreamers called Petrified Titans, I've mentioned it many times in my videos, that was when I really first started putting the pieces of the puzzle together for this idea that, well, if there were once great trees, then there might have been great animals as well, and that led to my that led to my studies of Mont Go. So if you're new to my channel and you haven't seen the Unveiling a Titan series, it's a 6-part series that I did where I went in depth examining a mountain here on the Costa Blanca in Spain. And from the very get-go, I was well aware of things like pareidolia and apophenia and cherry picking and all of these different classic mistakes that people make when they're looking at things and they're drawing conclusions, and they think that just because something looks like something, it must absolutely be that thing that they think it is. And so I didn't want to approach it from that perspective. I've got a background in, I've got 2 college degrees, not that that means anything in today's world, but I have a bachelor's degree and a degree in chiropractic, about 10 years of university studies. So I didn't want to go out with a bunch of videos talking about ideas that most of the world would think are completely crazy without doing a whole lot of work first. So anyway, this video by J Dreamer's Petrified Titans was the one that really started to link the trees together with titans and this whole idea of instant petrification and all of the different things that we're seeing, which I've taken to calling biogeology. I think it's a good umbrella term. Many people are familiar with the term mud fossils. I think that's great for a certain aspect of what we're seeing, but not all of it. And so definitely check this video out, and then we'll move along here. So I'm just going to start with a little primer with just some photos out of a folder I have called Trees, and just talk as I go. So this is I think called a bloodwood tree. It's also known as a dragon tree, and it bleeds red. And so the sap is bright red. It's just an example of how all the different ways in which sap can sorry, things are not going there. All the different ways in which sap, why is it, there we go, can petrify, and I'll show some examples of that in a moment. So to me, when I see this, I just definitely see tree stump. I see tree stump and root structures. There's a lot of different opinions about this. Some even think that they're melted buildings. I don't think that that's the case. More on sap. Wait a minute, am I even showing? Hold on one second. I'm a rookie at this stuff, so yes, I am showing my screen. Thank goodness. Okay. All right, and there we go. So when you see these giant mountains, the Everests and the Himalayas and the Alps, I think that what we're looking at are the remains of the great trees. We'll come back to this in a moment. And the plateaus, we've still got some pretty big trees, but these would have been practically moss by comparison to the giants. More examples of the red sap of that tree. Now this is an example of a slag heap here, and I have to admit that this particular picture looks a lot like a slag heap. I think this is from a guy named Mike Ferreira, this picture, and he doesn't buy the big tree theory at all. He thinks that these are just mining waste, and I can understand that, but the reason that I don't think that's the case is that a lot of these plateaus are showing grain, and that's something that I didn't mention with the Mr. B333 video, is that that one of the things that he didn't do is he didn't go in 3D and tilt and look around. And when you go into these different what look like tree stumps in Madagascar, you can actually zoom in with Google Earth if you tilt it in 3D mode, and you can see the basalt columns, and you can see how they're forming like grain. And mainstream geology tells us that those are from lava flow. That lava has come up out of the ground, it's cooled, and it looks that way. And I don't believe that anymore for a second. There's no examples that I've ever seen of lava cooling in that fashion. They're claiming something, but they don't have a scientific experiment to show that it can happen. There's no video of it happening. So they're just saying things, and then they talk about hundreds of millions of years, and we weren't around to see it, so how can we contest their claims? So other theories are that these might be giant mushrooms, and even in the mainstream geological narrative, there's no doubt that giant mushrooms once existed, and they've got, I think, as many as 12 foot tall, possibly taller. If you look into mycelium and how mycelium grows, it's clearly massive, and it can cover huge areas, and what we call mushrooms are just the fruiting bodies of the mycelium. So that's an interesting thing. We'll see another picture here in a moment. But again, this is basalt columns. They want us to think that a volcano just shot that thing up and then it cooled with these, beautiful hexagonal columns. I don't think that that's the case for a second. I think that this is biological, and exactly what, with these particular things, I'm not certain whether it's tree or mushroom or something else. But I don't believe that they're tendons, which is one of the big theories out there, and I'll explain why. So just more examples. This is the myth of Paul Bunyan, and this ties in obviously to Titans and the idea of great ancient beings that once cut down the grand trees. And we've got a lot of old texts like the Bible and the Book of Enoch that talk about these things. And there's so many different types of trees. This is the image that I was talking about before. So this is a particular type of fungi. We'll look into it more, and you can see that it looks astonishingly like Devil's Tower. So some are led to believe that it was formerly a mushroom. More plateaus. Some say this is volcanic as well. You need to move away some of the earth and see what the stones look like underneath that to get a better idea. And that's the video we just saw. So let me just show a couple more things and we'll move on. So yeah, this obviously begs the question, if they're plateaus, if they were tree stumps, how could they just be cut like they were cut by a razor at the base like this? It's a good question. Can't answer it. This is a petrified tree stump. Also looks a great deal like Devil's Tower. And we're going to look at a little bit of footage from from people who've done some drone footage of Devil's Tower in a second. This is from the work of Hangman 1128, and I'm not certain about the trunks, these things. With 100% certainty, I think that they're definitely, some of them are trees, maybe not all of them. But when it comes to certainty, the work of Hangman 1128 is to me, is absolutely conclusive. It's self-evident. And this is an example of what we're going to be looking at a lot today. So this is how a tree breaks down, and these pieces can be a ½ an inch wide or smaller. They can be breaking down into dust. And you can see how they crack this way, and they break off this way, and they'll be flat on the edges, and it's just a theme that you're going to see over and over and over again. And in order to really understand, if we're talking about a tree that is 8 to 10 miles wide in diameter, we're talking about massive stuff, right? It's hard to get your head around it when you're as small as we are. But something like this here would be, so this just being a small piece of a branch of a bigger tree, this might be 50, 100 feet wide. That's how big we're talking about. And if you look at all this grain, all the different ways it goes and all the different colors, some is black, and we'll talk about the black as well. And So layering, if we go back to this and you see these different layers, if you look at them under a microscope, they're not just the same color, all of them. They'll be banded, and they'll do this sort of a thing. And so the trees, when they petrify, they go to certain trees, I can't speak for all of them, but definitely the cedars will petrify into harder stone, and then some of the bands will be sandstone. And then that sandstone will break down into sand. And the sandstone can be incredibly detailed with micro layering, or it can lose its layering entirely as it's on the verge of going down to being sand. And this is sandstone here. We're going to look more at this in a moment. And this is what's known as aggregate. Some would look at this and think this was formerly a building, that this is an example of geopolymer. And Hangman has shown very conclusively, in my opinion, that that's not correct. And the reason it's not correct is that this is coming, and it's coming from one side. So you have to think of, if the trees were real, we know that the floods were real. You know, the biblical flood, all of the world's religions, all of the world's mythologies have these great cataclysms that occurred. And you can look to the works of people like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson and the stuff that they've done when it comes to dry falls in Montana, and just all the different ways in which the world has been scarred by these events. And this is an example of that scarring, because what happens is, as the floods come, you know, these massive tsunamis that reached the tops of the mountains and flowed at great rate, they're actually whacking and embedding the remains of the tree. But you'll only find this on one side. On the other side, you won't find it. So this gives you an indication of what direction the flow was going as well. So here, you know, we're taught that this is all sedimentary layering. This is how it's all been created. It comes down and just lays down bit by bit by bit, and it's dead life forms. Whether it's on land, the trees are falling and dying, and then more trees grow and fall on top of those, or whether it's underwater, where you have all the creatures dying and going to the bottom of the seafloor and then being compressed by water. That's what's creating our sedimentary layering, and then as that pressure increases in the mainstream model, that leads to metamorphic rock, which means that these layers are starting, because of that pressure and the heat, are starting to literally kind of melt and mold together. And that, I think, is a fantasy narrative, and you'll see more about why. This is just an example, one of those little chunks that I was talking about before. We're going to get into this as well. Here is clearly wood grain, and everywhere that you see quartz veins, this is the sap of the great trees. And it is absolutely incredible, all the different ways in which the sap can manifest. When you see these absolutely beautiful pictures, these are screenshots taken straight from Hangman 1128's channel. His work is incredible. I've watched many hours of it, and sometimes I break down in tears, because to me how do I say this? It's so rare that you find actual evidence that is just undeniable, where it's self-evident. You know, you don't have to believe, you can just know. Like, if a group of people are standing around and there's an elephant over there, someone can point and go, look, there's an elephant. And nobody's going to go, you're a crazy person. They're just going to recognize, yeah, it's an elephant. Well, we've all been blinded to very obvious truths that can be seen around our realm. And I call that paradigm blindness, and we're all suffering from it, because we've been lied to about so many different things. So you can see it in the smaller trees. It's the exact same structure. These will break down to basically powder, but because this is still biological and not petrified into wood, it doesn't turn into sand. It just turns into, you know, mud and the bottom of the forest. Hi everybody, I'll check in a minute. Just want to get through this. So this is an example of what I consider to be 100% proof, because he's Hangman Mike, also a Mike. A lot of great mics out there. 13th Monkey, shout out to you in the chat. So he's showing, so when you see the gray, it didn't used to be that color. It's all oxidized. You've got little plankton, or not plankton, but what do they call, lichen and moss and different things that are growing on it. It's been weathered, and so it starts to take on that gray look. But this is still showing the color, and it's still showing the grain and the micro layering. And he's found sites where it's like stone, and then, you know, you can see, and then he's pulled it off, and some of it is still wood. So he's got the in-between stages of petrification. So there is literally no doubt, if you go through his work, about the existence of these great trees. And again, you can't even imagine how huge they were. So just more examples, and we'll get to these. Now, some would call this melted building, and I was like, okay, well, it doesn't make sense that a tree is going to grow like in layers upward like that, but root structures of trees go parallel, right? So that you've got the trunk coming up, and then it's perpendicular to the ground, and then the root structures are going to go out like this. So that could also very well be the root structure of a great tree, and not just some massive building like so many people want to believe. And you know, I'm going to be doing a live stream with Ben, Waking Up with Analog, the archivist. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but he and I are going live on Tuesday, and we're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. But this is just one of many examples in the ancient records of what look like tree stumps and then pyramids sitting on top of them. And I've done a lot of studying on the subject of star forts and star citadels and the old world cities, and how they all seem to have these fractal-like star patterns and are on a scale that you just, it's hard to fathom. And one of the things that I've theorized is that a lot of these great cities may have actually been built on the stumps of the trees, just like you see in this picture, because you know, these are going to reach the waters of the deep. They're going to be an endless supply of water, and then they're also always built next to water. So water is key in this whole thing. And this is one of these rare stumps that actually appears to still be exhibiting the growth rings of the tree. That's definitely a smaller one. Here's some examples of sap. And here again, to me, this is just undeniable. I challenge anyone to explain how something like this, as magnificent and beautiful and detailed as this, could come about through sedimentary layering. It's just not happening. This is clearly the piece of a tree. This is the sap which petrifies to all kinds of different quartz. It can be anything from white to black and every color in between. There's blackened portions of the tree which will petrify to coal, and then coal eventually petrifies to obsidian and probably diamond as well. And so yeah, we'll look more at this later. Those are Mike's dogs. I mean, just look at the majesty and the beauty of this. I like I said, I'm brought to tears when I watch his videos, because the footage is so amazing, and he's such a pure person who I think is definitely sharing profound truths that the rest of the world hasn't even begun to wake up to. And so consider yourselves some of the lucky few. And if you've got a way to deny what I consider to be self-evident proof of what we're seeing here, then I challenge you to do so. So let me just say hi to the chat here. Hi, everybody. It's been a while since I went live. It's not always easy for me to hit the live button. Oh my gosh! Wow, somebody. Wow, Red Cap Goblin. Thank you. What a generous donation. Ever find any signs of mega fungi or colossal-sized mushrooms? Supposedly they're mushroom colonies thousands of years old. Yeah, there are different theories about that. Like I think it was Terence McKenna put forth. I don't think he came up with the panspermia idea, but he definitely helped to push it forward. This idea that spores are so, like mushroom spores are so hardy that they can withstand incredible heat and are resistant to decay. And so basically it's the idea that these can percolate out of the atmosphere, if you believe the heliocentric model, and then they can, over millions and millions of years, find their ways to other planets where maybe there's just water and stone and nothing else, volcanic activity. But mycelium is interesting because apparently it's a primary decomposer, so it doesn't need any other creature to survive. It can actually leach mineral direct from rock, which is interesting. So a lot of people believe that first there was the mushroom. I don't know which came first, the mushroom or the tree, but I'm guessing it was one or the other. But you have this idea that the mycelium kind of can come. So the spores land in the water, and then eventually they work their way to the shores, and then they come up onto the volcanic rock, and they can take root on the volcanic rock with just the rock and the water, and then they can start to leach the minerals, and that's all they need in order to start to create the fruiting bodies. And once they create the fruiting bodies of the mushroom, those die. And the mycelium doesn't, because that's the actual creature. The mycelium, the mushroom, is just the way that it, it's its seed to perpetuate itself. But as that mushroom dies more and more and more, that gives rise to the topsoil, to the ground that all of the other vegetation will eventually live on, and so. There's megafungi, I think, in fungi. I'm a fun guy, but I don't know how to say it. Megafungi in the Pacific Northwest. There's one area that covers, I think, thousands of miles, if I remember correctly. So yeah, to me, it's pretty obvious that such things existed. So let me just look back in the chat here a little bit before we go on. And yeah, Mike has been busy building a new house after the fire. Yeah, he's been, and you know what? He's done so much work, and it should be one of the biggest channels on YouTube. And to me, it's just an example of shadow banning. Because he shot up to, kind of like my channel did, shot up to close to 20,000, and then it's just sat there and sat there and sat there, despite putting out video after video of amazing content, and it just kept getting better and better. So yeah, he went through some real trials and tribulations with his house, and I've had a couple conversations with him, and I just love the guy, and I hope he's doing well, and that he comes back soon. So, never caught me live. What a pleasure to have you here, Joseph. So, yeah, so one of the reasons it brings me to tears is that it's so rare that you can actually find proof of something. It's a lot easier to disprove things and to uncover lies, and that's part of life is learning how to exercise discernment and to recognize lies from truth, and so people have heard me say this, and they might find it surprising. Like, after all the work that I did on Mont Go and the Unveiling a Titan series, that I can still doubt my conclusions when it comes to Mont Go. I have no doubt about the Heartstones. I've never seen any other explanation in mainstream geology or otherwise that is better than what I've been presenting in my videos. But yeah, I've got my doubts about Mont Go still. I'd love to be 1,000% certain of it, but when it comes to the great trees, thanks to the work of Hangman, not because of the tree stump stuff, not because of no forests on flat Earth. That opened me up to the idea, but I was never 100% convinced. But after seeing Hangman stuff, there's just no doubt, and it hits you how incredibly massive and magnificent this realm is and was, and and it ties into so many other things like, the eschatology, cataclysm, the great floods, the, potentially plasma apocalypses, and you name it. Hey, Brian, one love. Thanks as well to you. I don't know. You guys never seem to sleep. Gypsy, Brian, I see you everywhere all the time. Jolly man. Yeah, so let's see. I'm way behind. Yeah, water does tend to lay flat. It's funny how that works, and it's amazing how far you can see across it when you have good optics. Like, shouldn't it be blocking the curve? Yeah, mycelium also works like a network, allowing different species of plant to communicate with each other. Yeah, the original internet. Fiber optics at its best. Yeah. The mushroom is the fungus fruit, exactly. And analog in the chat. Wonderful to see you, Ben. Looking forward to our conversation. Oregon, yeah, there's big mushrooms up there too. Is there a link to the channel you mentioned? If you type in hangman1128, you can't help but find it. Someone else can maybe put the link in there. All right, so moving right along, huh? All right, so back up here, Devil's Tower. So it's an interesting thing to ponder. I think it's also fascinating that Hollywood, from the time I was very young, made an indelible link between aliens and Devil's Tower, because that, I'm not going to, spoiler alert, the end of that movie, that's basically where humans are starting to interact with the aliens, and they're landing in this secret base that's at the top of the tower. And to me, knowing what I know about NASA and fakery, I think that's just to throw people off the scent of biogeology and self-evident truths that are hidden in plain sight. And so let's just look at a little bit of footage. Or not. Oh, helps if you hit the play button. What a rookie. Felt like such a boomer just trying to get OBS working today. Tower. All right. So this is a guy walking at the foot of Devil's Tower.
Or Bear Lodge.
Just skip ahead a little bit. Wow. Really slow connection speed here. Wasn't doing this before. Okay, here we go. All right. So one of the first things I was struck by when I looked at this footage last night is that you see no signs of grain whatsoever. And I haven't examined Devil's Tower. When I was a kid, I got to go to Devil's Post Pile. It's interesting, they always call it Devil this or Devil that. But if you look here, here's a tree trunk. That's kind of funny. It's like as above, so below, right? Miniature version. So when you look at this stuff up close, which we will in a second, is it lagging at all, or is the video good? So at least in the bits that I saw in this video, I'm seeing no signs of the tree grain. Now that could also be because it's been exposed so much. As I said before, you get this mossy kind of growth here. You get a leaching of the different materials from acid rain, and probably volcanic ash and water and flooding and you name it is gonna change the way it looks, and you'll see that in my other examples that I'll be showing later of Hangman's work. But you know, to assume that this was caused by cooling lava, I think you need your head examined. I can't believe people are falling for it. Can't believe geologists are falling for it, really. And if somebody's got a video out there of it happening, I'd love to see it. Never seen anything even close to this sort of a pattern from lava. I used to live in Hawaii, and there were lava fields there, and I'd go climbing in the lava fields, and you know, you can see all kinds of videos of lava coming out of the volcanoes and cooling, and it either looks like this, you know, smooth kind of flowing thing, or it's all jagged and you know, nothing in between. None of these kinds of clear geometrical shapes. So let's see, there's something I wanted to show you in this one. Oh yeah. So I was talking about the root structures going horizontal to the ground, and I think that when you look, this is coming out. You know, a lot of people want to call this a melted building, and we'll see some stuff in the, you know, in Colorado. What is it called? Red Rock, or you know, there's a famous amphitheater. I'll show. Maybe I already showed pictures of it, but actually I'll come back to those for a second, because. So the trees. Here we go. All right. So this could have fallen this way or been deposited, but I believe that this is actually part of the outer portion of the tree. So when we see Devil's Tower, hold on, bring that back again. When we see Devil's Tower, you get this curving, sloping upward. And this, to me, doesn't look like cedar, so I don't know what kind of a tree that was, if it was a tree. But this is what the cedar looks like, and we're going to see this on a massive, massive scale. And so my take on this, and I hope that Hangman would agree with me. He's done all the boots on the ground work. Is that this is the sloping upward of the tree. So if this had not broken off and you saw it continuing, it would turn upward, and then it would be perpendicular to the ground. And same with these. This is, I think, the next picture. No, that one. One of these is another area called the Flatirons. But when you look at this up close, you'll see the grain, and when you get up right next to it, all these little tiny pieces over here and down here and all around here, it's all wood, all of it. And this is just an example of it when it's petrifying, and it looks identical to the. I've shown these in live streams, but if you get in real close there, you'll see these bands, these quartz veins. This is the sap of the tree, and it's just utterly magnificent. And so these are going to be like when you see a tree stump, and only the outer portions of the tree stump are still remaining. This is what that is. This is like an outer edge of one of the portions. So, you know, I'm not sure which way these are pointing, but basically I would guess in the opposite direction of what we're looking at would be the tree stump itself in that whole area, and it would probably go 6, 8, 10, 12 miles across. And so these, I believe, are going to be root structures because it's horizontal to the ground. These are the Flatirons. And this, here you can really get a sense that this is clearly wood or petrified wood. And it looks like, okay, this is a layer, but then when you get in close, it's got smaller and smaller and smaller layers. And we're going to get up real close in a moment. in here you can see the subtle detail of the grain, and when you get this smooth, curvy kind of lines to the grain, this is from the erosion that happened from the flooding, and then you'll get one side, like I said before, where you have the aggregate, which is the some would think that it's geopolymer, and others think differently. So this is we'll come back to this in a minute here. So I just wanted to mention that, because now I want to talk about some other theories related to this, and why I don't agree with them. And let me just check in everything good. All right. Okay, so uh-oh, move the file. Okay. Let's see, where did I put that thing? Hold on one second. All right, so one of the main theories out there in the alternative research community is that Devil's Tower is a tendon, an Achilles tendon of a giant, and I think it was Roger Spur of Mud Fossil University that put that idea out first. The idea that this is all part of the Achilles heel, the Achilles tendon of a giant Titan creature. And I've seen his breakdowns of this, and it's compelling. The histology, which is the study of tissue, makes some sense when you look at it. So what he's talking about, if you think of your Achilles tendon, this would be anchoring into the heel, and he's saying the rest of the foot is underground. And my question is, where is the rest of the creature? You know, if we go onto Google Earth, we go to tower. Oops. Ah. There she blows. All right, so this being a tendon that anchors in to a heel that's underground. Now, the first thing I would say about that is, where is the rest of the creature? His theory is that as the floods were rising, because I think that the mythical tales from the Bible say that God commanded that the trees be cut down so that all of the corrupted creatures and horrible beings that had been created by the fallen angels wouldn't have a way of climbing and escaping the floodwaters. So that's the official story. And so I've heard Roger Spur say that he thinks that as they were trying to avoid the flooding, they were standing and they were gasping for air, and that is how this got embedded in the ground. And I just asked the simple question, like, where is the rest of it all? But even if we accept that as a possibility, and we go into the histology of it, this isn't a heel. This is your knee, and this is a collateral ligament, and this is your your fibula, your tibia, and each one of these tendons is going to link into the bone. And the way that it does that is it creates these little balls, and those balls then grow inside the bone, and they're very, very strong, and they are connected to the tendon, which grows into the ball. So then the ball anchors into the tendon, right? So that's the basic theory behind both his idea that this was once a Titan's tendon, and also this is his explanation, and Tyson as well, from Tyson's Mud Fossil Adventures, that this is how they go about explaining what we call concretions. And there's all kinds of concretions that exist around the world, and so this would be the tendon itself, or the remains of the tendon, which probably has some kind of an anchor into this ball. That may be true. I don't know. But concretions in and of themselves, I think, are incredibly fascinating. And I think the problem with a lot of these theories is that when people start to... Hold on, let me just make sure I'm doing everything right here. Hate it when I'm not showing the screen. Yes, good. When people, they have their pet theory, eventually what happens is they try and apply that theory to everything. I've seen it done with people that believe in the melted building thing, people who believe in geopolymers, people who believe in titans. They want to apply it to everything, and I think more often than not, the truth is E, all of the above. If it was a multiple choice test, just pick E most of the time, you're probably going to be right. Probably going to be right more often than not. So yeah, these could be tendon balls. And when you see them broken open, and we will here in a second, here you go. You see they have growth rings, right? And that's fascinating in and of itself, because to me that suggests that they grew. They're definitely biological in nature. On that point, I'm 100% in agreement with Roger on that. But I'm not in agreement with him when it comes to the whole concept of Devil's Tower being a tendon. I just can't go there. So here you see that the concretions, they can be found in really large numbers, and there are beaches where they're strewn across the beaches, and these are interesting also because it ties into another theory of Rogers and Tyson's, which has to do with the interstitium layer, which is something I'll show you pictures of in a moment. But if you see how this breaks open, look at the quartz and these lines in here. That is clearly not something that grew through some kind of sedimentary layering or depositing of mineral inside. I mean, they're basically perfect spheres, and this is obviously something that grew, in my opinion. This, I believe, is from the inside of a cave, and I think Mike Ferreira suggests that these are also a byproduct of electric mining. So there's lots of different ways in which these things can come about, and that's what excuse me, that's what a lot of people are missing, is that it's probably not just one thing. Roger thinks that this is an example of one of those tendon straps coming down, and that this is a big tendon ball. And it could be. More examples of concretions. Whoa, excuse me. I didn't know that was in there. So here we've got the basalt columns, and this is a really interesting formation. Not sure how that relates to the basalt. All right, enough of that. So let's see here. Back on track. Let me just check my notes. So yeah, I showed the picture before of fungus. That's an interesting one. Coming back to that, if you look at the where was it? There we go. It's uncanny how similar those are, and maybe the mushrooms, once upon a time were that big. I don't know. They talk about 5 great dyings off in the geological record. Even mainstream geology talks about that, and gigantism is also a part of the mainstream narrative. They don't talk about giants. They don't talk about dragons. They want us to believe that dinosaurs existed, were wiped out by a comet, or 65 million years ago, and or an asteroid, and now they've morphed into chickens. So yeah, it's an interesting fantasy. So this is interstitium. It's a newfound organ, and this is a fascinating topic in and of itself, because it's only recently been discovered, and it's supposedly one of the most, the biggest organs in the human body. So this is the dermis, the skin layer, and you see all these little black dots in here. These are different anchors. So like the reason your skin, when it's pulled on really hard, doesn't like slide off and never return to where it was, is because it's anchored in place by the dermis, and part of that is the interstitium, and it's this fluid layer that exists in the tissues that they didn't find until recently. And it's interesting because this relates to a conversation I had with Tom Cowan recently, that's on my channel, an interview that I did with him, because when it comes to how they go about proving things exist with microscopes, and you got to slice things really, really thin to get them sandwiched between the glass so that you can look at them with microscope. But it's not just that you're cutting the sample that you're going to be looking at, and it's no longer alive, it's no longer in living tissue. You have to do that in order to be able to see it. But they're also doing all kinds of things and using stains and chemicals and different things. So the researchers said these fluid-filled spaces had been missed for decades because they don't show up on the standard microscopic slides that researchers use to peer into the cellular world. When scientists prepare tissue samples for these slides, they treat the samples with chemicals, cut them into thin slides, and dye them to highlight the key features. So how might that change the original sample? They also use ice, or not ice, but extreme cold, and there's all these different techniques that could easily be creating artifacts in the tissue and creating things like gas bubbles. So a lot of what we're told are organelles that exist inside of the cells may actually be artifacts that are a function of how they're going about looking at the sample to begin with. So when scientists prepare tissue samples for these slides, they treat the samples with chemicals, cut them into thin slices, and dye them to highlight the key features. But this fixing process drains away fluid and causes the newfound fluid to fill the spaces, or the newfound fluid-filled spaces to collapse. So that brings us back to these tendon balls, which is what would have been seen. So they have new visualization techniques that allowed them to see this fluid. This ties, I think, into the whole anatomy that has to do with fascia, and how fascia permeates every single tissue in our body from our head to our toe, and it's in every tissue, surrounding the tissue, and then in smaller and smaller layers all the way down to the microscopic level. And let's see if I can find it quick. There's a strolling under the skin. The way fascia moves is just so fascinating. So it looks like mycelium. We've got mycelium inside of us. And when it's stretched, it moves around in the most, to me, like illogical ways. But obviously it looks like spider webs. And when they stretch it, it starts to move. It's so fascinating. Let's see if I can find a better example. Here we go. So as it's stretched, it's just the majesty of life. And also, fascia, some theorize, is capable of what's known as solitonic transmission, which is basically sound transmission. And sound moves far, far faster through a fluid medium than it does through air. So this can account for some of these things that humans, or could account for some of these things that humans appear to be able to do that we can't explain just looking at the speed of conduction through nerve fibers. So it's just another one of those things that I think is incredibly fascinating. So interstitium, and then you've got these little dots here. Those would be in if we're talking about a being the size of a continent, or maybe half a continent or something, then those interstitium balls could conceivably be the size of these concretions that I was showing you before. So I think that there's something to that theory, and I'm going to show you something in a second here, but you can see all the different ways in which these concretions manifest. But I have another theory about them as well, and we'll get to that in a minute. But basically, they could be seeds of the great trees. There's a lot of different kinds of trees and a lot of different seeds. They could also be potentially, if the Titans were real, which I definitely believe they were, there's all kinds of stones that the body creates, kidney stones, gallstones, and those can be created in large numbers in the body. And if you look at how they grow, which we'll do in a little bit, you'll find that they look very, very similar to the concretions. And also the trees themselves are producing all of the different kinds of sap, and sap also forms in little globs that can be spherical. So it can be petrified sap as well. So whenever somebody is pointing at something and saying it has to be this and it can only be this, it's like, that's when I start to back away and I go, okay, it seems a little too confident. Maybe there's other explanations for it as well. So this is Mud Fossil, or Tyson's Mud Fossil Adventures. He has incredible footage, boots on the ground stuff, and he's looking at things that he claims are the size of, basically I was showing a picture here, I didn't mention it, but this is the bilipid layer and the whole interstitium. You've got these different layers here, and he's seeing this in the geology in the region that he's in. So it's matching. There's a fractal quality to our existence that's undeniable if you have the eyes to see it, and it's matching exactly what he's showing is matching the anatomy as well. I don't know if his conclusions about a lot of things are accurate, but he seems to be very, very confident. So, yeah, let me just show you. Close that one. So this would be, in his mind, this is a concretion that exists in a layer that is part of what he's calling the interstitium. Wow, so slow. Yeah, so he's talking about the bilipid layer, and they're all throughout this are these balls. Here's one, here's one, here's one, and then you get this structure here, and he's calling this the bilipid membrane, which is pretty fascinating because it looks like it. You may be right. And then all sorts of these are interspersed throughout. So it's an interesting theory that I think has some credence, but I don't think that it applies to as many situations as he and Roger might think, because I had a conversation with Roger, actually, our first time and possibly our last time talking. I don't know if we'll talk again, but we have a lot of differences of opinion about a lot of things. But when it comes to biogeology and the idea that so much of our realm was once biology, I think Roger's been right on from the beginning about that. And if it wasn't for him, I never would have got onto these ideas in the first place. So, shout out to Roger for his work. I've never heard him explain in any kind of way that makes sense to me how a 1,000-mile long dragon can exist on a ball the size of what they tell us it is. And he seems to believe everything that comes from NASA, but also doesn't believe what comes from NASA. But he makes use of it for his theories, his unified field theory of all that is when it comes to the nature of our realm. But when it comes to the stuff, the outer space stuff and tendon balls and all that, and the asteroids being former comet strikes and whatnot, I just can't imagine that there's truth to that. But again, these are massive concretions embedded. So these could also be, in my opinion, the seeds of great trees that have been deposited in slurry flows that were then petrified. That's one potential solution. Another would be what I was saying before, which we'll come to in a little while. So here's another potential possibility. I mean, these are far out trees. I didn't know these existed until a month ago. That they grow all kinds of these berries on the trunk. So if something like this were to fall down and petrify, but it was on a massive scale, how many concretions would you find then? Right? So to just assume when you see something that it has to be that thing and it can't be anything else, I think is a bit close-minded, and it borders on hubris, because there's a lot of people making a lot of claims and they're not showing a whole lot of humility. So this ties into the same idea. If you look at these and how they form, I'm not saying those spherical concretions are these, but you've got this other phenomenon, which are these stone jars that are found all around the world. And this is an idea that I got from Hangman 1128. He's got a video I'll show a little bit of in a second. But I'll just leave you for a second to ponder that, if I may, and then go to the bathroom for a second. I'll be right back. All right, so let me check in before continuing. Giant seeds, yes. Electric mining, yes. Tendon balls, yes. What else? Kidney stones, gallstones, yes. All of the above, yes. Someone asked, where's the rest of the tree? And I'm not sure what that was in reference to. If it's in reference to Devil's Tower, I would say where are the rest of the trees? Because as I said when we started off this, if you look at Mr. BB33, I always forget 333, the video that I showed at the very beginning of this stream, there's a whole bunch of those stumps, and if you tilt and you look in at angles, you've got the basalt columns that looks just like the grain of trees, and you have the whole root structures surrounding these trees. So where's the rest of it? I don't know. Maybe there's some truth to the biblical stories in the Book of Enoch and some of these others where they were taken down. You've got at the center you've got Yggdrasil, the great tree that's in the Nordic mythologies that was also cut down. So where did they go? Yeah, they were probably mined and taken. And I think a lot of our underground tunneling structures and all of these things that are happening underground are also very intimately related to the great trees. Those balls are from chemical discharge and can be reproduced in a lab. Yes, that's true. Epidermis. I haven't seen the Z-pinch produce these balls. I'm not sure what a Z-pinch is. I should probably know. I'll have to write that down to look into. Z-pinch for future reference. Tendon balls, dragon eggs, perhaps. Yeah, there's what do they call those ones that are they're beautiful inside. Thunder eggs, I think, is what they're called. So Tyson panned out. Yeah, I mean, so someone here writes Tyson panned out on Google Earth recently, and the so-called dragon over on top of China. And he's not a big fan of Roger and Tyson, but they definitely look like dragons. Yeah, and 13th Monkey has mapped out one in the Pacific that's something like 1,500 miles long or longer. I think there's a number of structures in addition to Roger's dragon in the Sahara that looked very much like they were beings. And I'm all for Google Earth investigation. I think it's great. We have where'd everyone go? Where'd I go? There I am. It's an incredible tool. If it wasn't for Google Earth, I never would have done the research on the mountain, because the very first time I got wise to the idea after seeing some of Roger's videos and Jay Dreamer's videos, I got on Google Earth and I started to tilt, because I had done that many times with buildings and I knew it was possible. And I started moving around, and I found, like, in the first hour and a half, I found like 10 different anatomical features that matched up with vertebrate anatomy. And it looked a heck of a lot like an elephant. So I started looking in deeper into elephant anatomy, elephant histology, and that's what that whole series is about, is all of the different things that I found that boggle the mind when you start to contemplate the odds of such things occurring. And that's when some would say it's a preponderance of evidence. There's way too many very specific things that line up with both the anatomy and the histology, which is the study of tissue, and for it to just be random chance. Same thing with the heart stones, if people are familiar with the research that I did on those. Someone asked me, Aftonbladet, do you still read Swedish news? Ja, det gör jag. Jag läste Aftonbladet igår faktiskt. Men det är inte det bästa när det gäller tidningar, eller hur? Okay, so let's see here. So, who else is watching the epidermis in their birthday suit? That's more information than I needed. All right, so let's see, anything else? Yeah, and again, thank you to who was it, Red Cap Goblin, for a very, very generous donation. All right, so let's get back to it. So this is, I'm not saying that these were organic in their origin, these jars. But it's a fascinating thing to ponder when you start to get into looking at them from an aerial perspective and looking at what I showed before, which is these different kinds of structures that it can be created. So this is a video on Hangman's channel, borrowing from another channel, and here we go. So imagine a big tree with these, a great tree, and is it possible that these are just petrified those? They have these rings at the top. And yeah, there's a whole wealth of information on Hangman's site that I would definitely look into. So yeah, I mean, were these man-made and then they're just like randomly scattered everywhere, or is there another explanation for them? And they vary in size, but they you know, and they vary in type, just like different kinds of trees. You can see there are so many different. It's like, what the heck? Why would they? Why would they do this? And so obviously Hangman believes that this is an ancient yew tree, and he's looking at greater structures around them. So he sees the remnants of the tree itself, not just the what would you call these, berries or conifers. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to ponder. And you know, going back to the whole idea of this may be a bilipid layer, like he says. Concretions may be what he says, and it may be other things as well. So I'll get into some of my theories about some of the other things that it could be. This is a guy, he's a regular mainstream geologist who is showing how concretions are found, and it's very interesting that they're found in lava. So this ties into a theory that that I have called boiled egg theory about the petrified organs, and how they are forming by hardening as the outer layers of the body are being destroyed. And so this is I believe this is lava flow. I know that they're often found in lava, and so they're just there, sitting in there. So are these seeds of trees? Are these, you know, some body part that was from a creature that was very, very large and then got burned away? Those remained because they were already stone, right? Like a kidney stone or a gallstone. And then when you dig them out and you break them open, they're filled with crystal. Yeah, so just another thing to think about is that concretions are just sitting there, you know, embedded in lava flow. And then I did a search for Devil's Tower fungus because I couldn't find that picture I showed earlier. Look at all the weird stuff that comes up. I mean, and these, for example, these sap or whatever that would be called coming from a mushroom, if that were to petrify, that would give you some pretty interesting looking stone, right? Something like that. So when you just look at, for example, agates, agates alone are so far out. I'll just breeze through these. You know, to me, when you see this kind of stuff, the whole sedimentary layering thing, it just falls apart so quickly. This definitely looks like something that grew, whether it happened through some kind of high level electrical plasma discharge, or whether it was biological, whether it was, you know, who knows what. It's but they're just so magnificent. Little worlds unto themselves. That's amber, I believe. Sap, tree sap, right? So things can get caught in the sap as well. Yeah, we worry about quicksand. Imagine how if the big tree, the people who lived during the times of the big trees, they probably had to worry about quick sap. Anyway, yeah, so just looking at all the different crazy ways that mushrooms can grow, and it just never ends. And this is that fungus, different photos showing the way this particular fungus grows. And could that be Devil's Tower? Maybe. If you think about the size of Devil's Tower compared to the great cedar in Colorado that Hangman has documented so effectively, Devil's Tower would have been tiny by comparison. So could it have been a mushroom, near the tree or on the tree or something? I don't know. It's fun to ponder. It would be nice to have a time machine to be able to go back and know for certain what it was like back then, the time of the vapor canopy, as some like to call it. All right, so we'll get back to that in a minute. Let me just look at my notes, see if... All right, so I always save the best for last, and people are wondering, why I haven't started talking about the conclusive proof for the great trees. I've already shown a bunch of it. I'm just going to go back in more detail. And yeah, I've had comments. Someone said, I think the mud fossils, tendon balls are seeds from these trees. I tried to engage Roger numerous times with no reply. He doesn't want to honestly engage. After hearing your story with him, I believe he could be purposely spreading bad info with truth. Yeah, after my conversation with him, I really feel like Roger believes the things that he's saying, honestly. I don't think he's right about a whole lot of the things he's saying, but I'm pretty confident that he actually believes them. So I don't agree with the people who believe the earth is flat and who attack him because they call him a shill and they think that he's paid controlled opposition or whatever. I think that you got to let people believe what they believe, and he has a huge following, and yes, he might be misleading people about the nature of our realm based on his beliefs, but that's how it works with freedom of speech, right? First Amendment is kind of important, in my opinion. Someone wrote a really interesting message to me yesterday, and I'm going to read it here. Hangman's in the chat. Oh, awesome. Man, oh man. Welcome. Welcome, brother. Where are you? Oh, yeah. Hope you'll go back and watch from the beginning, because this is really an homage to you, kind of a day, because I just wanted to share your work with people in a more comprehensive way, because I've been talking about it for a long time, but I wanted to explain a lot of the different theories that are out there and why I don't agree with them and why I think you're spot on about everything that I've seen you show. Someone writes, body parts separate into fascial layers caused by high plasma from multiple volcanoes triggered all at once by the phoenix event. The etymology of the word phoenix is PHO, which equals red or dark in color, and nix, which means snow. This is because of the ash fallout and the spewing lava. Ash clouds in multiples create high plasma events, and I've got some amazing footage. It's on my phone, but I don't have it on my computer. I'd show you right away of the kinds of electrical activity that can happen around volcanic ash, and it's just unbelievable the amount of electricity and plasma that is there. So to me, that just feeds right into the whole boiled egg theory and instant petrification and that sort of thing. See footage of just one volcano and you'll see lightning. Lightning is plasma. Plasma strikes at anything conductive if any saline solution, saline being salt, is near or on the body, or if the body is saline. Flood water that's not too deep or drained off, leaving a high salt coating. It can happen instantly. If not, the ash covering the body will take a few months, depending on the sun exposure and humidity and fresh water or rain. And that ties into the works of Wise Up, and he's been showing all kinds of examples of different both what I think are biological and archaeological remains that are things that are petrified that they claim are these megalithic structures that were carved out of stone. And he's saying, no, they weren't carved out of stone. This was once a boat, for example, and the boat was then covered by high mineral content waters mixed with ash, and that worked its way into the fibers of the wood and petrified it. So Wise Up has got some very interesting footage as well, and it ties into this idea of ash mixing with salt water. The ash covering the body will take a few months depending on sun exposure and humidity of fresh water or rain. This part's interesting too. The high silicate content of the ash invades the cells and crystals form. Fat and arterial tissue mostly turn to shock quartz. I'm not sure what shock quartz is, but that's totally in alignment with my theories about biogeology. It's very obvious that the sap is turning to quartz with the great trees, and when it comes to the other finds that I have here in Spain, which are very distinct from what Mike Hangman 1128 has shown, it's the same thing, that I believe that the fat and the lymph nodes, fat, brain material, tendon, ligament, all of that is fat in nature, and I think that's all going to petrify into quartz in one way or another. And so when he talks about the high silicate content of the ash invading the cells, that's, in mainstream geology, they would call that paramineralization, which is their explanation for how we get petrified trees. But petrified trees, they tell us, form over hundreds of millions of years, and I think that's bogus. I think it can happen very, very quickly. And that gets into biological transmutation and electric transmutation, where you get these high-energy events that can turn things to stone instantly. And that ties into the mythological tales of things like Medusa and biblical tales as well. So... and then so fat and arterial tissue mostly turns to quartz. This is from a guy named Shad8776. Thank you, Shad, for a very interesting comment. And thank you all for the comments. I used to get way more on the videos, and I don't know if it's shadow banning or people are just bored with the subject matter, but those are what keep me going. So thanks for sharing your thoughts and appreciation if you do appreciate it. Also, depending on the acid or alkaline content in the area, different pH triggers different results. Exactly. So this is why we get such wide variations of all the different manifestations of how how these things form. It's just like for the heartstones, I get everything from bone white all the way to dark red, all the way to black, and everything in between. Why is that? Well, probably has a lot to do with what he said here, which is lots of variables such as chemical bonds find a nearby partner to have an affinity with, and a chemical reaction takes place. So the material surrounding it is going to shape how it turns out. It's just logical. And depending on the acid or alkaline content in the area. So there's so many different factors that play in, and that's why we're getting this incredible myriad of different manifestations. So, and then he says, this happens in periodicities over the Earth's timeline when a geomagnetic polarity shift happens. This is what the ancient cultures named the phoenix, thunderbird, cross in heaven, etc. Many names. Probably Cthulhu, probably Medusa as well. I hope this helps your community get closer to the answers you're looking for. This is nothing new, by the way. There's high degrees of BS, or no, the high degrees of something. It's a 5-letter word he doesn't spell out. Understand this in certain sects that are also allowed access to this information. Yeah, so this has all been obfuscated and hidden by the secret societies, and this is why we all need to start, sharing this kind of information out there so it reaches a broader audience, because it's all been so heavily shadow banned that if people aren't, boots on the ground doing their own research, creating their own content, or at the very least sharing content, with others so that it gets out to a wider audience, then we're just all in echo chambers where a whole bunch of people with similar beliefs are just, talking back and forth to each other. Also, we're allowed to pursue these lines of inquiry as the one world religion is awakening, and the elite want us to find the truth ourselves. I'm not so sure they want us to find the truth ourselves. It seems like they're trying to hide the truth. But then he says, this is a quickening. Do you feel it? Definitely. Once you've been fed BS your whole life, it's hard to accept new wisdom and knowledge when you hear it from an external source. So we all have to seek, and we shall find. And you already have all the answers from your ancestors in our essence, in DNA. Ask and ye shall receive. Yeah, so what a cool comment that was. Lots of wonderful information in there. So let me just peek in with the chat and just run this while I'm reading some of the comments. This is Mike Hangman looking at some of the examples of the petrified sap that he's brought back in his yard. Someone asked what my idea on Sasquatch is. I haven't looked into it enough to really have a strong opinion, but like with a lot of things, I think if so many people are so convinced, I think there's probably some truth to it. When you look at how the mainstream media has addressed the crop circle phenomenon, it's kind of like the flat earth topic. They create a straw man argument and they run with that and they claim that that's what people are believing, and it's not what they believe at all. And then they debunk the straw man. And when it comes to the crop circles, that's an incredibly deep, complex phenomenon, and they want us to believe that, for over many, many years' time, a couple of farmers with wood planks on their feet and ropes created these incredibly complex geometrical shapes in the fields, and it's just utterly ridiculous if you know basics on geometry and if you go into the details of how that phenomenon occurs and all the different elements to it. Some great documentaries on that, but you won't find anything on it in the mainstream. All right. Yeah, wonderful to see you here, Mike, if you're still here, and I wish we could talk about this stuff, because you're the expert on so much of this. I'm just trying to get the word out. Hangman says 99% of the periodic table are the products of the biblical trees, and if titans also exist, I would say some of it is titans, but I'm on board with the vast majority coming from the trees. In fact, I was going to get to that. If I may if I may show your work for the crowd, I've picked out a bunch of favorite screenshots, but let me just read some more of the chat here, see if I've missed anything important. Yeah, so he says he's got to go and he hopes to continue with the periodic table soon. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your compliment. Where does the gold come from? We're going to get to that one, from the other rare minerals. So you can kind of hear it in the words. They hide a lot of stuff in plain sight with geology and mining. They talk about things being found in veins. When it talks to, when they talk about the waters of the deep, they talk about arterial, artesian wells, for example. Well, art is the root for artery, which is, an artery. So you've got all these pores and the root structures of these great trees reaching down into the waters of the deep. And I think that's where a lot of our rivers are coming from. And like I said before, I think the star citadels have been built on top of the former trees, and that's that's where a lot of the mining has occurred as well. Oh wow, I caught up. Cool. Well, how wonderful to get a visit from the man himself. So, no forest on flat or picks in the. Okay, we're going to go through some trees, and then we'll start to wrap this stream up. I think I've covered just about everything in my notes. Oh, I mentioned biological transmutation. This is something also not acknowledged by the mainstream. And what the mainstream says about biological transmutation, or what biological transmutation is, it's the idea that plants or animals are capable of creating elements. So we're taught in the mainstream model that stars get bigger and bigger, and then eventually they supernova, and the bigger they are, the more gravitational pull they create, and then that creates more and more pressure, and then as the hydrogen and the helium and the base elements are being compressed, that gives rise to these new elements in the stars, and then once they supernova, they spread that out into the universe, and then eventually that stuff will start to coalesce, and it becomes smaller suns and planets and whatnot. So that's where they're telling us that the periodic table of elements come from, and they say that you need fusion, you need nuclear fusion to create elements here, or maybe, I don't know, possibly through something like what they're doing with CERN and whatnot. But the truth of the matter is, it's easy to disprove that, or not disprove that, but to disprove the idea that the elements can only be made there. And going back to the chicken, it's been shown that the diet of a chicken is not sufficient to take in enough calcium to create the shell. So a chicken puts out an eggshell or an egg every day, and that's got an eggshell that's made of primarily calcium. And so it's eating mica and other things in its diet, and then it's actually creating the calcium. So right off the bat, the chicken is proving that biological non-fusion transmutation is a fact. And then there was another experiment that was done by a guy looking at, he planted a tree in a pot, put it in a room, and I think he gave it just distilled water and sunlight and air and nothing else for many years. So all it had was distilled water, which has no minerals or in it, and then that water combined with the air and the sunlight was enough to cause this tree to grow and to take on mass and to become heavier. And they measured the weight of the earth that was in the pot and the pot itself and the plant from the beginning, and over time it took on way more mass. So that's just evidence there that the trees are creating elements. And if you don't believe it, watch Hangman's footage, because he'll show you that it's all being created by the trees, and we've been fed a load of bull. So, and again, this whole as above, so below, this all breaks down into smaller and smaller bits, and it's just incredible to watch. Here he's showing, this is what, oh, yeah. So there you can see the quartz. And guess where they mine gold from? They mine gold from quartz veins. So I'm going to show you some examples of that in a second here. So back to the trees. Now these are all from Hangman. So I've already shown a bunch of this, but I'm going to breeze through it again. To really grasp this, you have to understand what you're seeing here and how that is the same as that, is the same as that, and it just gets bigger and bigger. And you can see how it breaks down. It looks like planks of wood. and here again, you can see all these different kinds of color, and he's got stuff that's like from white all the way through, and some that's still not, partially unpetrified. So there's unequivocal proof that this is happening. This is a river bottom, and you can see it's just breaking down in the exact same way. So these bands we've talked about already, and just think about how complex trees are, and all the different grain and the knots and the different ways in which that manifests, and it's never ever the same twice. And you've got this outer layer, and you've got the inner layer, you've got the sap, so many different ways in which this manifests. This, look at the complexity of that structure there. And here. So you have to keep all of this in mind when you're looking at this footage, and then you'll have the eyes to see it for what it is, because I believe it is completely self-evident that these are the exact same thing, but on a scale that, it's like straight out of the Avatar movies. And so when it's horizontal like this, you're looking at root structures, and then those root structures are exposed by the great floods. And you're going to see that this is what it does. The softer material gets eroded away, and you get this banding. Paul Cook has been talking a lot about the sandstone layer that he's finding all over the UK. He calls it the golden layer. He thinks it's all geopolymer, and I've disagreed with him, and I've tried to talk to him about it, and he hasn't wanted to listen. He hasn't seen. I've pointed him to Hangman's channel many times. He doesn't want to hear it, and I pushed too hard, and I pissed him off, and so he's lost respect for me, and he doesn't want to talk to me anymore. So I apologize, Paul, for that. I'm sorry I do that sometimes. Push too hard when I've got something that I'm certain about. So you have to understand this. Like, a person could probably be here, but this could be this might be 3 or 4 feet tall here, but that could also be 30 or 40 foot tall. And this is going to be your softer material. So I don't know if the cave dwellers carved in to this material while it was still wood, and that's how they were able to shape everything, or if because it's the softer sandstone that they were able to carve in and create the little dwellings. But my point with Paul is that these dwellings, one of the things that he's finding that makes him think that they're geopolymer and created by man or someone is that there's pre-rendering and rendering, and in some cases even paint on top of that. So my take on it is that this is going to break down to sand, and this is not going to make for a very livable environment. If people are carving in and they want to live in that, it's going to be constantly in a state of breaking down. So you're going to basically be living in a dusty, sandy environment. So I think it's very likely that they put the rendering on to preserve the sandstone from breaking down, and then that allowed them to paint over it as well and make it and to beautify it. All right, so these are just examples of the micro layering that you can see, and once again, it's breaking off in these big chunks. And sometimes on the grayed out, or the gray portions that are more weathered, sometimes you can still make out the lines, but most of the time not. But if you come around to the other side that has color, it's very clear that the lines are there, even though you might not see them on the gray portions. And this is a massive version. You can see how the tree here of the exact same thing. And there you can see it breaking down. So, yeah, what a beautiful part of the world. So again, imagine this much bigger, because it does come much bigger, as I showed you in some of those pictures, like of red rock and who knows if you're near some of the larger root structures, you're going to be carving into this. And this also is a perfect explanation for the pores that Paul is finding all throughout. all throughout the UK. Not all of them. Some of them are carved, I'm sure, and they've run wires and cables. So clearly they've created habitat there. And I could be wrong. I might be wrong about what I'm saying about Paul's findings. I'm willing to admit that. And if I am, I'm very sorry. But what he's showing, so much of what he's showing looks exactly like this. And so we're going to come to, I talked at the very beginning about the aggregate. So water, say the water was flowing from behind us, going in this direction. It's going to smooth all of this, but it's also going to embed rocks into portions of it. But the backside is going to be, is not going to have the embedding. And here's an example of the layers. And then you've got the layers are completely eroded away, and then this is going to break down to sand. So this is exactly what I think is happening, and this is where we're getting our sand and our mud and all of our beaches from, is coming from the breakdown of the great trees. And the flatter parts of the world, like the UK and Malta, it's the trees have been removed. They're not there anymore, but it makes sense that the root structure still would be. So see the erosion here? Now, here's your aggregate. There you can see the lines. Here's the embedding of the rocks, and then this turns to stone as well. And again, I showed this at the very beginning. Look at this. This is so beautiful. Paul would say that this has been poured and that it's all geopolymer, and I disagree. And so here you got these lines, and then here you can see this has all been broken away long ago. This layer is fresher, and it's still got the color right here. And look at these pores going in. This is part of the tree. It's just what the tree does. And look at all the different layers. So this could be the bilipid layer also that Tyson is finding. That's something I didn't mention, that this particular kind of stone here, the darker layer, might break down into almost cellular-like pieces. So, and then concretions, like I said, could have been deposited. I don't know. It's there's a lot of different possibilities, and I think we all need to work together and keep an open mind and not just decide that it's one thing and it can't be anything but that thing. And again, this is a perfect spot to, like, if this was on a larger scale, to create a habitat by carving in. And I don't have any pictures of them, but all these cliffside dwellings, that's exactly what people have done, right? Lots of those found throughout the world. And here you can just see the contour and the beauty of the wood. And I think that's Mike up there, the man himself. What a great picture. But this had a massive slurry flow coming through, and it deposited some aggregate, but the rest of it smoothed out. And if you go on the backside of these, you won't find any of this. So this is why I think that this is absolutely 100% conclusive proof that the great trees existed, and that those who deny it are just lacking the eyes to see. And here, again, root structure, in my opinion. This is the sandstone breakdown. I think this was a tree. That's my best take. I saw a video of Mike's the other day, and this was awesome. He was talking about, envision this, and now envision a mud flood coming from the right towards the left, and it's just going to fill all of the space between these. Now, obviously, these have been cut by people. These are just logs. But instead, envision it like this: broken, fragmented, great tree parts that have been utterly, branches, twigs that have utterly been devastated in the cataclysm. Then the tsunamis, then the flooding. It's going to be deposited with all kinds of stuff, and it's going to make a mountain. And you're going to see a bit of stuff sticking out here, a bit there, a bit there, a bit there. It's not going to make any sense because it's not one thing. It's a whole bunch of one thing, but lots and lots of different forms of it. So I thought that was a really good way of illustrating. And you can see here, the mud is filling in. This is probably the root structure. That's why these are not cut, right? The tree, it's a tipped over tree, I would guess. And then that's the bottom of the roots has got the mud. But, you know, it all adds up. Every single aspect of it all adds up when you see it, especially when you see the parts like this where he goes and you can see that it's still wood. It hasn't even completely petrified. All right. So, been wanting to do this for months. Like, look at this. Here you've got the gray, you've got the lichen and the moss. Here you don't really see the layering, but it's so prevalent here with still the original color of the wood. And this could be also bark. If I don't have examples of that. But when you see the bark of the trees and you see it laying down flat, it has that look to it. Oh, this is another thing, obsidian. This is just amazing. This is, I told you parts of the tree, they petrify to coal. It's called coalification. In my Petrified Titans and Organs Part 1 video, I showed a video clip of a father-son team from like the 70s or the 80s that proved unequivocally that you can take wood and in a short amount of time you can turn it to coal. And the way they did that is they put it in a steel pipe with a bit of salt water, and they capped the ends of the pipe, and then they heated it for a couple of weeks, and they turned it to coal that looked exactly like, you know, regular coal from a coal stream. So that's just all part of the tree. When the tree has been burned and hit with high energy, some of the tree turns to coal, some of it turns to stone, some of it turns past coal into obsidian, and you can see that there's grain here and layering, and you can even make out the lines in the obsidian. But here, to me, there's your proof right there that this is becoming this, because it's melting down. It's called vitrification. We make glass from sand. We heat it until it melts, and then it gets to the point where it's so clear that you can see through it. Well, obsidian doesn't get clear. It's a different kind of sand, so it turns to this kind of material. But here you can see all the grain, right? This is what's all around that area. Is all of these chunks of grain, but it's only a small portion of it that turned to obsidian. So that must have been most hit by whatever hit it. And so a lot of people are like, this is a tree stump. I don't think so. I think this is part of a massive tree. Maybe it was a ring that stretched around and curved around, like you can see it curving around here behind us, and that we're actually looking from inside the stump out towards the outer layers of the tree. And you know, now when you look at mountains like this, it all makes sense. And then just getting back to the quartz again, and all the different ways it manifests. And where do they find gold? They find it in quartz veins, and it's absolutely beautiful. Maybe it's the nervous system of the tree. Look at this picture that's coming up in a second. Look at that. So here you have the stone, here you have the quartz vein, and it's just filled with gold. What a gorgeous specimen. So the trees are making it all. And maybe the Titans as well. This is what I was talking about, the bark and those people that were laying in the river. All right, I think I'm almost done with this. Just remember this, because it's showing you so many different manifestations of the great trees right there. It's all fractal. As above, so below. As within, so without. All right. Oh, and I love this picture. This is Mike. He's holding up one of those little chunks. And it's like, that could easily be a 50-foot or 100-foot piece off in the distance. Like that. Or that. And this is what I was talking about, like how the tree hollows out. Oh, this is another thing that I didn't know until recently. I saw it in one of Mike's videos. The great trees, after they were felled, after they were left for a long time. So they had the opportunity to rot before the great flood came. That's according to the scriptures. So that explains all of these different degrees of decomposition as well. It's a very important point. And here you can see that hasn't completely turned to the gray material. And this is just more of quartz. And quartz makes mica, it makes so many different elements, if not all of them, or most of them. And yeah. Oh, this is one of my absolute favorite pictures. And look at the pores here. There's your golden layer, I think, Paul. And I mean, if that is not a 100% proof in your mind, then you're choosing to be blind. Look at this. That is so clearly tree. The great trees. And what a great channel. Hangman 1128. This is a mine he went into, and I can't remember why I had that in there. I was going to say something about it, but that's it. We came to the end of the presentation. Let's see if I missed anything here. Oh, this could very well be a layer of knot tree. I think this is more in alignment with... Don't want to get a copyright strike. But to me, this is looking like skin muscle. I could be wrong, but it almost looks cellular. So, yeah, it's going to be fun if more and more people start to research this stuff. I lack basically all knowledge about chemistry and and geology, for that matter. Ezekiel 31 from the Bible. Many people have posted this over the years. There's a video by Mike where he's showing it, and it's talking about how the great Assyrian tree in Lebanon was with beautiful branches overshadowing the forest. It towered high, its top above the thick foliage. The waters nourished it, deep springs made it grow tall. I missed the beginning. Who can be compared with you in majesty? The waters nourished it, the deep springs made it grow tall. Their streams flowed all around its base and sent their channels to all the trees of the field. So it towered higher than all the trees of the field. Its boughs increased and its branches grew very long, spreading because of abundant waters. All the birds of the sky nested in its boughs. All of the animals of the wild gave birth under its branches. All the great nations lived in its shade. It was majestic in beauty, with its spreading boughs, for its roots went down to abundant waters. The cedars in the garden of God could not rival it. That's interesting that they call it the Garden of Gods there in Colorado, where you've got all of that, all of the cedar remains. So the cedars in the garden of God could not rival it, nor could the junipers equal its boughs, nor could the plane trees compare with its branches. No tree in the garden of God could match its beauty. I made it beautiful with abundant branches, the envy of all trees in Eden, in the garden of God. Yeah, I won't read the rest, but you can do that when you like. And I'll save this topic for another time, but it ties into the petrified organs. Somebody mentioned these a long time ago, and I saw it, and I was like, nah, that's not what I'm looking at. It's really gross too, kind of freaky. But I missed something very important, and I will cover it right here. Where is it? I'm missing. Okay. Yeah, unlike most ancient human remains, bog bodies often retain their skin and internal organs due to the unusual conditions of the surrounding area. Notice that, their skin and internal organs. So once this has happened, which part is likely to disappear first, the organs or the skin? And what's it going to leave? So combined with highly acidic water, low temperature, and lack of oxygen, preserve but severely tan their skin. While the skin is well preserved, the bones are generally not, due to dissolution of the calcium phosphate of the bones by the peat's acidity. The acidic conditions of these bogs allow for preservation of materials such as skin, hair, nails, wool, and leather, which all contain the protein keratin. And most importantly, for petrified organ theory, it preserves the organs. So the skin and the hair and the nails and all of that and the dermis, that's all going to break down and become earth, right? So we really are walking on the bodies of the ancients in a whole variety of different ways. Yeah. So I tuned out there for a while, but I had a lot I wanted to finish. Let's just see here. People still with me? How long have I been going? All right. Vitrification. Did you know the tardigrade can do this naturally and survive for thousands of years without food or water? Tardigrade, that's interesting. Tartarus, Tartaria, tardigrade. Some things they try to get rid of and they just can't. Mr. Traumatic. Name rings a bell. I think he's got a channel. Nervous system turns to gold. That's my theory. Yeah. Also blood plasma. You have to think of the blood plasma as well, because it's 55% of blood is plasma, and that's almost all. It's fat. It's long chain fatty acids, lipid proteins that could petrify in a whole variety of different ways. And yeah, 13th Monkey is a mic. Hangman 1128 is a mic. I'm a mic. We're all part of the mycelium. Mike. Yeah. So, any last comments or questions before I draw this to a close? It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've all enjoyed it and gotten something out of it. So, usually the skin and heart sac is what Roger Spur has been finding about his DNA samples that exist in the ground. Yeah, the heart sac, the pericardium, is the thickest of the fascial sacs surrounding all of the organs. Every organ is surrounded by a fatty sac, but the heart's is the thickest, and that feeds very much into my theories about, boiled egg theory, that the chest and abdominal cavity. I'm not going to repeat it. I posted a 5-minute summary video yesterday on the subject, so go and check that one out. Boiled egg theory in a nutshell, or eggshell. All right. Yeah. So on Tuesday I'll be on with Ben, and we're going to have a fun conversation, probably about some of this stuff and more about my research, because none of this was really about my research or the mountain or the heartstones, which is the entire thrust of my channel. So if you're just hearing some of my stuff for the first time, go back, see the Unveiling a Titan series. If you're short on time and you just want an overview, there's 2-part videos called Petrified Titans and Organs, Part 1, the discoveries, and Part 2, the how and why. and I do my best to cover it. But those videos are old, and I've learned a lot since I made them, and ideally I should do part 3, but those each took me about a month to make. So the live works a little bit better, and even that I don't get to very often. And then I have a playlist for the petrified organs playlist. So if you sort those in order by upload date, you can watch the progression of the discoveries. The first video I ever made on the subject was called Mud Fossils, the Heart of the Matter, and that was because the first heartstone that I found, I just assumed initially that it was made, it was a mud fossil, and that it was made through this, well, Roger would call it nucleophilic substitution, I believe now, but the mainstream narrative also calls this paramineralization, which is what they say about the petrified trees, is that, but they're talking about it happening over millions of years. And so initially I found the first stone, and then I started finding a lot of them, but I wasn't finding any bodies, and that was the weird part. And so eventually I had to abandon mud fossil theory because it didn't account for the empirical findings that I was having, that I was discovering. And that's why I coined the term biogeology, not to take anything away from Roger or Alan from Mudflood Was Armageddon, another channel who I haven't mentioned at all today, but he's done a lot of great work over the years. And I think it's a good umbrella term for what we're finding, which is very large quantities of geology were originally biology, but not in the way that they tell us. And so clearly volcanoes are not biology. When you can see lava spewing up through them, I'm not saying that was a body, maybe it's the body of Mother Earth doing its thing, but that's different. That's igneous rock, magma and all that. It's clearly coming from somewhere. It cools, but it's not the kind of rock that I've talked about through this whole live stream. That is biogeology, and I think that mud fossils is a very good, term for one of the different ways in which that can manifest. Some are going to be instant petrification, some are going to be petrified organs, some are going to be the great trees, and then eventually you can get like more of a, specification as more and more is understood. All right, thank you all for being here, and I hope you enjoyed it. Much love to everybody, and thanks for the comments. I hope you will like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and share this around. The comments keep me going, and that donation today was wonderful as well, because this all costs money, and YouTube doesn't pay me very much. All right, take care, everybody. Wonderful to finally do this with you. Bye. Keep your heart soft.